Well, hello then, I do hope you're all well, and I do hope you all had a wonderful weekend. Now, this is Boris Johnson's Tory MP Paymaster Michael Ellis soiling himself after there was an urgent question about the resignation of our Crime Minister's ethics advisor, Lord Gite. I'd decided he could no longer be an ethics advisor to someone who clearly never had any ethics in the first place. And watch till the end, as I have a couple of questions I want to ask, but enjoy.
We now come to the urgent question. Those who wish to leave, please do so quietly. Urgent question, Fleur Anderson.
Thank you for granting this urgent question, Mr. Speaker. Resignation of the independent adviser on ministers' interests. That wasn't a question. Oh, she's done it.
She's done it. Minister? We now call Minister Michael Ellis.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. I would like to start, Mr. Speaker, by thanking Lord Gite for his work as independent adviser on ministers' interests, and indeed for his years of public service before he took up this role. I hold him in the highest regard, Mr. Speaker. He's been honoured multiple times, and he's an example, of course, of excellence and service in public life. And I thank all members of this House for their work in regards to this matter. But I think that all the members of this House will recognise that Lord Gite has demonstrated diligence and thoughtfulness in the way he has discharged his role over the course of the past year. We have benefited hugely from this service. Now, the Prime Minister will be issuing a letter, Mr. Speaker, in relation to Lord Gite's announcement. Both Lord Gite's letter and the Prime Minister's reply will be deposited in the House shortly. As soon as I have those letters, or my office has them, Mr. Speaker, they will be placed in the library. Now, the government is particularly disappointed, of course, that Lord Gite has taken this decision, as only very recently, as this House knows from a debate last week, significant changes were made to the role and status of independent adviser on ministers' interests. As I set out to the House last week, these changes represent the most substantial strengthening of the role of independent adviser since its creation. The most substantial strengthening of its role, its office and its remit since that post was created in 2006. So let me set out briefly, Mr. Speaker, the reforms to the role that have been introduced by this Prime Minister. Firstly, the independent adviser has a new ability that he and his predecessors did not have before to initiate investigations in relation to allegations where there has been a breach of the ministerial code. This is a significant change. Previously, as the House knows, as an adviser, they were not permitted to do this, he and his predecessors. The adviser will still, of course, need the consent of the Prime Minister of the day to start an investigation, but, as I made very clear last week, this consent would normally be given. And the ministerial code now includes new detail on proportionate sanctions for a breach of the code. Previously, there was no proportionality in those sanctions, and even the smallest of technical breaches to a minister in place might have resulted in enforced resignation. Now there's a range, and a proportionate range of options. And that, by the way, Mr. Speaker, was exactly as recommended by the Committee on Standards in Public Life. In future, the independent adviser will be consulted about the revisions to the code as recommended by the Committee on Standards in Public Life. The ministerial code now includes more specific references to the role of the independent adviser and more specific references to the duty on ministers to provide the independent adviser with all information reasonably necessary for the discharge of the role. So in conclusion, Mr. Speaker, as Lord Gite himself has made clear, the new arrangements are workable, and he noted the increased transparency that they bring. The government will, of course, now move to make new arrangements and looks forward to working within the strengthened system that I've described.
Can I just say to the Minister, who I have the greatest respect for, he knows it's 3 minutes. I'm sure the team here can manage to get that speech for 3 minutes. And I say to all benches, please, don't take advantage. There's a lot of other business to follow. Right. Back to Fleur Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome the fact that this letter will be coming. It's taken asking an urgent question to get it, so I'm very glad we've been able to ask this urgent question. But clearly the new arrangements for the independent adviser are not workable, and that's why he's had to resign. Mr. Speaker, to lose one ethics adviser was really an embarrassment, but to lose two in 2 years, just days after the Prime Minister's own anti-corruption czar walked out on him, well, it's becoming a bit of a pattern, Mr. Speaker. It's a pattern of degrading the principles of our democracy. The Prime Minister has now driven out both of his hand-picked ethics advisers to resign in despair in 2 years. It's a badge of shame for this government. Mr. Speaker, in an unprecedented move, the Cabinet Office had failed to publish Lord Geight's resignation letter, and it has taken this urgent question to get it. Lord Geight described resignation as a last resort to send a critical signal to the public domain. Can the Minister confirm if ongoing investigations launched by Lord Geight will now be completed? Will this be in the Prime Minister's letter? For example, how will the shameful allegations of Islamophobia experienced by the Honourable Member for Wealden now be investigated? Yesterday, Number 10 stated that Lord Geight had been asked to give advice on commercially sensitive matter in the national interest. What is this? Can the Minister confirm whether this relates to a direct or an indirect financial interest of the Prime Minister, a family member, a friend or a donor? When will a replacement be appointed? Can he assure us that there won't be another 5-month gap, although it will be a hard position to recruit for, because it's been clearly shown to be an unworkable position? Lord Geight's predecessor walked out because his findings about the Home Secretary's bullying were excused by the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister has ridden roughshod over the rules. To conclude, what next? This vacancy must be filled urgently, but the role urgently reformed, as the Committee on Public Standards in Public Life has concluded. Honesty matters. Integrity matters. Decency matters. I hope the Minister will do the right thing and come clean about this resignation in his letter.
When the Minister
in your own time. Get arrogance of him.
is ready. Well, you need to go to the dispatch box. It might be easier if you stand up.
Well, Mr. Speaker, briefly to answer the Right Honourable Lady, if I may. I can't obviously speak to other investigations that may or may not have been in progress, but we'll have to find out about that in due course. It speaks for itself. As for other sensitive matters, it's not obviously appropriate to dwell on those, as is clear. But what will be clear, of course, is that the letters will speak for themselves. So I think the Honourable Lady will wish to wait for those.
We now come to Chair of the Committee, William Wragg.
Mr. Speaker, I rarely channel my inner Lady Bracknell and say that for the Prime Minister to lose one adviser on Minister's interests may be regarded as misfortune, but to lose two looks like carelessness. I hope that will be taken in the spirit it's meant to my honourable friend. And can I thank Lord Geight for appearing at our committee on Tuesday, where he did his best. I think with what he could work with was one of his quotes, but he did his best nonetheless, and I'm very sad that he felt the need to resign, and I look forward to reading his letter and indeed the reply from the Prime Minister. But could my honourable friend on this particular point give the House some reassurance? There was a 5-month vacancy in the role upon the resignation of the previous independent adviser. How much more quickly will that be filled this time?
Well, I'm sure my honourable friend will agree with me that it's important to ensure that whoever holds this role is not under constant pressure, political pressure, to attack the Prime Minister for party political reasons, and that if they don't, they're then accused of being a lackey or a patsy.
Dickhead, he's on your side.
That's not something that our independent advisers on ministerial interests deserve. We want the best public servants in our public life. We've had one in Lord Geight, and we will work further in due course. But I know he'll agree with me that it's in the public interest that party politics is not allowed to put pressure where it doesn't belong.
We now come to SNP spokesperson Brennan and O'Hara.
Speaker, another day, another scandal, another humiliation for the Prime Minister as another sleaze advisor quits. Of course, let's not forget when Lord Geidt took this job on 16 months ago, he was the personal appointment of the Prime Minister, and we were assured that his credentials were absolutely impeccable. And as Lord Geidt said, that if he were to resign, it would be a last resort, and that he would use that resignation to send a critical signal into the public domain. So we need to know what that critical signal was that he was sending out last night, and as yet we do not have details of his resignation letter. We could speculate. Could it be law-breaking? Could it be PPE contracts? Could it be breach of international law? So I'm pleased that the Minister is publishing the correspondence in full, but will he define shortly as opposed to immediately, and will he confirm that all of the correspondence will be published in full when it is published?
Well, Lord Geidt's credentials are impeccable and they remain impeccable. And he is an example, in fact, to people like me, he is an example to all people in public life for the service that he's given to Queen and country over the course of decades. He seeks to criticise these people who hold these public roles and make political points as if they don't support his position. And I suggest that that is not the right approach.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Does my right honourable friend agree that we've got a job to do and our time is best spent getting him on with the job and delivering on the promises we made to the British people and voters in 2019?
Tory soiling themselves.
I agree with my honourable friend.
Oh, that went well.
Right, let us speak. Helen Hayes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is the second of the Prime Minister's hand-picked ethics advisers to resign alongside his anti-corruption champion. I've met with children from 2 primary schools in my constituency this week. Children as young as 7 can see what is plain as day, that this government is rotten from the top. Does the Minister have any concerns about the impact that this shocking mess is having?
Look at arrogance on his face. Just tells you everything you need to know about this extreme Brexit Tory government. They just think that us mere plebs should just move on.
Having on trust and confidence in government and in our democracy.
Well, I respectfully disagree with the honourable lady.
Peter Bowles.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I congratulate the honourable lady for getting an urgent question. But it's a bit of a shame the urgent question isn't on something that our constituents care about. I don't know who Lord Geidt is. My constituents, I bet half of them don't know who Lord Geidt was. Look, if you want to get rid of the Prime Minister, you lot sitting there, move. No, not you, sir. I know you don't want to get rid of the Prime Minister. I would never suggest that.
You're not drawing me into the political debate of voting yes or no, Peter Bowles.
I got carried away. Mr. Speaker, Her Majesty's loyal opposition know that if things are as bad as they say they are, the way to get rid of the Prime Minister and this government is to have a vote of no confidence in the government. The loyal opposition have not been willing to do that. I think my constituents would draw their own conclusion about the facts.
Can I gently say to the opposition parties that if they wish for a change of Prime Minister, they ought to do something different from attack personalities. They should attack policies. But of course, if they were to attack policies, they would find that they would lose.
Wendy Chamberlain.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Government is accountable to Parliament. The independent adviser in Minister's interest is a crucial role, but is appointed by the Prime Minister. Does the Minister accept that the only way to begin the process of restoring trust in standards of public life, standards undermined by the Prime Minister, is to give Parliament a role in the appointment of the new adviser? At a minimum, we should be looking at a scrutiny session by PACAC and a confirmatory vote in this House.
You know full well that's not going to happen. Not sure if that's a cracking question, really.
Any Prime Minister of any political party appoints their own advisers, and that is what historically has taken place, and that no doubt is what will take place in the future.
Andrew Murrison.
Lord Guyte is a public servant of superb, unequalled reputation, utmost integrity, and his departure is greatly to be regretted. Does my right honourable friend agree with me, more generally, that those placed in a position of judgment over others must not have a previously stated position on the matter in question?
He makes a very good point, and it, of course, it is an age-old principle of natural justice that no person should be a judge in their own cause. Where an individual has given a view on the guilt or innocence of any person, they ought not to then sit in judgment on that person. And so I know the point that he is referring to, and I have no doubt that the Right Honourable Lady will consider that.
Very sure. I always feel sorry for the Minister when he has to come and defend the indefensible. But can I say to him this morning that what we've heard is a real disservice to the House that we have not seen these letters. They should have been available. But can I also ask him a question? It's not only disgusting and disgraceful, it's shambolic. This is the government. This is the responsibility of the Prime Minister we're talking about, and the responsibility is not here alone. It is the honour, integrity of every member of Parliament on the government benches to do something about this shocking scandal that undermines our parliamentary democracy.
It's the job of all members of Parliament, of all political parties, to maintain the honour and integrity of this House, and that is what the Prime Minister continues to do. The fact is that Prime Minister...
Mate, they're laughing at you. They're laughing at you.
Ministers of all political parties have had ministers who have been in breach of the ministerial code. Last week I cited some on the Labour side. They have not always done so, and I gave examples last week in the Labour Opposition Day debate of cases where Labour Prime Ministers did not take resignations from ministers who were found in breach of a ministerial code. I'd rather not refer to those names again, they're on the record, but it is an example of a Prime Minister being able to say whether they continue to have confidence in their ministers. That's a constitutional imperative. They must be able, whether it be a Labour Prime Minister like Tony Blair or Gordon Brown, or whether it be a Conservative Prime Minister, they have to have confidence in their own ministers. They can't absolve themselves of that responsibility by farming it out to somebody else, however honourable that person is.
So that's what you're left with now. You're left with whataboutery. So I'm just trying to work out. So you believe that your Prime Minister is not a fit and proper person now, but you sat there defending him and soiling yourself. Wow, what a tit, Michael Ellis, you are.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm incredibly grateful to the Minister for confirming to the House that the letter of resignation does exist, because the Deputy Prime Minister, who's also, I understand, a leading lawyer, said on the Today programme this morning, I don't know if the letter exists, and then he went on to say, I haven't read it. So we're extremely grateful for confirming that. But why isn't the letter available to us now? He knew he was making this urgent question. We could have then discussed its contents. We've heard about Lady Bracknell. What we have before us this morning is Uriah Heep.
Well, I think we can do without the literary references, but what I will say is that the letter does exist. I can confirm that, and it will be released very soon. And by the way, Mr. Speaker, it's only been about 2 working hours since this matter has been dealt with, so the government is acting very expeditiously.
Sir Christopher Chope.
Mr. Speaker, can I ask my right honourable friend a practical question? We understand that the Prime Minister asked his special advisor, Lord Guyte, to give him advice on a particular issue. And that advice has not yet been given. The person who's been asked for that advice has now resigned without even giving any notice or extending his term so that he can answer that question. Who is going to answer that burning question that was put to Lord Guyte by the Prime Minister a few days ago?
I'm afraid we will have to wait and see. Can I take this opportunity, Mr. Speaker? I think I may have mischaracterised what the Honourable Member for Argyll and Bute said, and if I did, I would like to apologise if that was not his intention from an earlier question.
David Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just wondered what it is about this current Prime Minister that causes him to have such rotten luck in retaining ethics and anti-corruption advisers.
Well, it's very kind of the Honourable Lady to ask that question, because I think this Prime Minister has a lot of good luck. Where he has good luck is when he wins elections. He won an election in London, and he's won an election in this country on a general election, and he'll win more.
Through lying.
Martin Docherty-Hughes.
Mr. Speaker, questioned at the Public Administration Committee on Tuesday, the now former ethics adviser described themselves as an asset of the Prime Minister rather than a free orbiting adviser. Now, taking that, doesn't the Minister now agree it's time that not only the ethics adviser's appointment was truly independent of the Prime Minister, but I have to say independent of politics and appointed by the Civil Service Board?
Well, I think all of our independent advisers since 2006 have been independent of politics. So there have been people, as Lord Geit, of the highest integrity and probity. And it is a position which is increasingly, of course, put under considerable pressure. But we have to have regard to that, and we have to ensure that these standards are maintained.
Stephen Timms. Sir Stephen. Neale Hanvey.
Speaker, the integrity and ability of Lord Geit is not in question. The question that we're all wondering is, what on earth is it that encouraged him to tender his resignation? What should we expect? What scandal is coming down the tracks?
Well, he may very well be disappointed. Looking for scandal under every stone is something that I think he will find is disappointing.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I make a point to the Minister and perhaps to the House that the effective work of an advisor on ethics requires that they are above the day-to-day political feuds and not the focus of them. And over the last few weeks and months, the position of the ethics advisor Prime Minister has been the centre of political feuds between different sides of the House, not confined to that side, not confined to this side. So can I ask my right honourable friend, the Minister, what actions he can take to ensure that the new appointee is protected from being the target of political attacks from whatever side they come?
Well, my honourable friend makes a very good point, and it's one I alluded to before, and that is we must be careful to ensure that future independent arrangements are made where individuals or entities are not put under political pressure to either do something or be accused of being some sort of patsy. The right thing to do is what is important.
I'll tell you what the answer is. Get rid of your Prime Minister. Problem solved.
Justin Matters.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I can't believe that the Minister's come here without having the letter published. Is the Downing Street photocopier broke, or is this more game playing? I suspect it's the latter. Now, I want to ask him about this commercially sensitive matter that Lord Geit was asked to investigate, which I noticed he didn't deny when responding to the Shadow Minister, but he didn't answer her question as to whether this relates to a direct or indirect financial interest for the Prime Minister or any of his friends, families or business associates. He can answer that question now. He doesn't need to give any details that would be commercially sensitive. He can just confirm who this relates to, because if he doesn't answer that, it doesn't look like carelessness, it looks like a cover-up.
The letter will be published and given to the libraries of the House in due course, very soon.
Mr. Speaker, we've got again today, the Minister for Defending the Indefensible sent out to account for the resignation of Lord Geit, who was no longer willing to do the same. My constituents see Westminster ministers who break the rules with no consequence, no sanctions, no ethics. Is it any wonder they now have no faith in this broken Westminster system?
I disagree with the Honourable Lady.
Well done.
The arrogance. I disagree with the young lady. Just arrogance.
Speaker, after many years working in both the public and private sector in many countries around the world, I cannot think of a single instance where the behaviour of someone in a leadership position obliged the person responsible for giving ethical or standards advice to resign twice in succession, and yet that person still remained in place. Does he recognise, does he agree that my constituents will conclude that the Prime Minister finds it hard to maintain a working relationship with ethical advice? And how many resignations of ethical advisers will it take before the Prime Minister does resign?
I think, Mr. Speaker, I venture to suggest her constituents will find it surprising that Labour focuses constantly in the last 6 months on personalities and not on policies. The reason has to be because when it comes to policy, Labour lose.
Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm sure that the Minister will agree that principle and standards in public life must be upheld. Can he confirm from the dispatch box that the government has no plans whatsoever to abolish the role of the independent adviser on ministerial interests?
I can only reiterate what I've said before.
Deidre Brock.
Just a few of the political casualties of the Prime Minister's premiership so far have been Allegra Stratton, who didn't attend Downing Street parties, Lord Wolfson on the principle the PM shouldn't break the laws he makes, the PM's anti-corruption czar, and now Lord Geidt, presumably, and who knows, because we haven't, that send button and hasn't been sent to us on the emails, presumably, though, for being unable to hold the Prime Minister accountable for breaches of the ministerial code. When will someone actually responsible for the degeneration of public standards in government be the one to go, namely the Prime Minister?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think the House will forgive me if I don't take lectures on moral probity from the Scottish nationalists. One only needs to Google the SNP and have a whole list of those incidents.
Wow. Soiling himself. Just absolute shocking, soiling himself.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What is it that's so unethical about this law-breaking, rule-breaking Prime Minister? It's about time he resigned.
Well, I realise it's challenging, but if they wish a change of Prime Minister, they ought to try and win a general election. They're not going to be able to do it.
Is there any point in appointing a new ethics advisor for a Prime Minister with no ethics?
Well, of course, the Prime Minister maintains the highest standards in public life and will continue to do so. And despite all of the scurrilous suggestions otherwise, she's given no evidence to indicate in what way she's referring to a lack of ethics.
Jim Shannon.
Mr. Speaker, the Secretary of State for Justice on TV this morning indicated that the resignation could be for confidential reasons, or indeed may be for security related and therefore can't be disclosed, or indeed it could be for other reasons. When will the new appointment be made for Lord Geight's successor? How can the House be assured that the person who will be appointed will be a permanent position and will stay the course?
I think the position may become a bit clearer when the letters are published very shortly, but the point that he makes about the future arrangements are ones that are going to be under very careful consideration.
We now come to...
Now the question is, well, it's a couple. One, when I was watching first, my first thought was, isn't this Michael Ellis dude attitude rather arrogant? But you know that when you have a little time to take stock and think things through, and I was wondering whether he just feels embarrassed to be out there, having to defend the indefensible and soiling himself. The reason why I thought that was because when he apologised to the MP after a mouth froth with Christopher Chope piped up. And the second question is, when he was left to basically digging up any old nonsense to attack the party opposite when they were in power, when they had Tony Blair and Gordon Brown in charge, and he seemed to think that was a bit of a gotcha in his mind to defend his boss, who clearly has never had an ethic born in his body at all. And when you think about it, it's not really a gotcha at all when you think about it. No, the question is, was that face of a man who was embarrassed to say that his boss, Boris Johnson, conducts himself in the highest of ethics, so to speak? Or am I just being a bit too kind and he's just another odious little bodger stooge and a despicable Tory? I'll leave that for you to decide and ponder. Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and I shall bid you farewell, because let's be honest, this video's gone long enough, so I shall leave the video here, and I shall bid you farewell and take care.